Okay, hello and welcome. This is Albatross FPV, and today I'm going to talk about this. This is my newest DIY Arduino game console, the Gameduino V4. So, just to tell you a little bit how this video is going to go, first I'm going to tell you about how I made it, all the processes that I went through to make it. Then I'll tell you about some of the features, so the stuff that you can see here, some of the ports on the back, and all that stuff. And then I'll show you some of the menus and some of the games that you can play in. Okay, so first things first, how did I make it? So the first thing I did was I made a breadboard prototype on a solderless breadboard, wired everything up, absolutely everything, learning from previous mistakes of omitting something and then realizing I made a mistake on it, assuming that it was going to work, and it didn't. After I was happy with the breadboard prototype and done with that, I started coding stuff just to confirm that everything on the breadboard was actually working, so the LCD and joystick and everything else. I mean, there is a lot of it, but I'm pretty sure all of it is necessary. I could probably omit a few things, but I do like a lot of the features that having a lot of code like that comes with. Okay, so zooming in on this particular part, this is the section of the code for writing the high score to the SD card for a lot of the simpler games that only have to say one high score per person. So the first thing that it does when you call it parameter for the file name, the file that you want to open, so this will vary between game to game. This is used for a lot of different games. So the next thing it's going to do is create temporary variables to store all the players' high scores so that you can rewrite them when you delete the file. So the next thing it's going to do is read all the different high scores for each player and then assign them to these variables. After that's all done, it's going to delete the file, and then it's going to write the high scores back to the SD card. But when it reaches the one for the current player, so player number 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to write the current high score, which is associated with the current player. So that was basically just to show you that it's not all plain and simple, and there is actually some code involved in doing different things like this. So after I was done doing the basic coding, and I was happy with how everything was working, I started to solder it up. So I soldered it to a through-hole PCB. This is just like a regular generic PCB, no fancy stuff, just so that you can make solder bridges between different components. That took about 4 hours, probably 3.5, 4 hours. After it was all soldered up, I started building the enclosure, this nice wooden box. It didn't take nearly as long as my previous ones, but it does still take some time. It probably took a few hours, maybe less. It didn't take very long. And then after the enclosure was done, I started coding a few more games. When I had finished the breadboard prototype, I really only had like one game. I think I had started on another one, but I didn't quite finish it. Anyway, I'm going to continue coding new games, so you might see more updates on my channel about new games that I've coded and just gameplay. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few different features. So, first thing you're going to see, obviously, is this screen. This is a white backlight, 128 by 64 LCD. It's quite nice compared to my previous game consoles where I've used character LCDs, which are nice, but somewhat limited for making game consoles. Now, the next thing that you might see is what looks like this big black button, but this is, in fact, a joystick. So you can move it all around in all different directions, you can move it in a circle. The next thing you might see is this power button. So this is, indeed, the power button, as I said. This is the power LED. It tells you when it's powered up. And then these are 3 buttons for navigating the menus. So this is Enter, Aux, and Back. Another thing you might see, they look like big holes, but they are actually switches. This one is used for turning the sound on and off, and this one is used for turning the backlight on and off. That saves about half the power, so it will run for almost twice as long. And this is the speaker hole. It's not very pretty looking, but it does the job, and it makes the speaker at least hearable and not really, really faint. Okay, and up here are some different ports. So this one is for the micro SD card. It's quite nice to be able to access the micro SD card easily while coding and testing different things, because I always seem to mess up SD card stuff. So it's nice to be able to have that. There's a headphone jack. This is only really a mono jack. I couldn't figure out how to get it coming out of both earphones, so you'll only have it coming out of the right earphone, but it's not the end of the world. This is an XT30 connector. This is used for external power if you want to power it from like a solar panel or a wall adapter. And then this is the USB port used for programming, and you can also use it for power. So those are most of the basic external features. It's powered by 2 18650 batteries in series, and with those, it'll have about a 16-hour battery life with the backlight on, and a 32-hour battery life with the backlight off. I haven't actually tested this is just from calculations, but it seems like it would probably do that, judging by the amount of time it's spent playing it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like when you power it up. So, if you press the power button, it's going to power up, and when the power LED turns on, you can stop holding the power button. Okay, so then you enter the player select menu. This is where you can swipe back and forth to select different players. I'm Aiden, so I'm going to select Aiden by pressing enter. And then you're brought to the function game select menu, so this is where you can select different games to play, and different functions. So for instance, power menu and clock. Those aren't technically games, so I didn't call them games. So I'm going to make a run through of all these different functions. This first one is the power menu. So these are just thumbnails. They don't actually show you what's in the menu, but they're just kind of to give you an idea of what it means. So I'm going to press enter to enter the power menu, and this is the power menu. So this will tell you the input voltage, in this case 7.22 volts. That's the voltage of the batteries in this case. This is a battery percent, so 39%. And this tells you that it is indeed powered from the batteries. If I press enter, it'll ask me if I want to power off. And no, I don't want to power off, so I'm just going to press back to go back. One of the things I'm really proud about this game console is its almost stupid-proof power system. So it's really friendly for the end user, which is in reality only going to be me, but I make a lot of stupid mistakes, so it's nice to have that. So for instance, even though it's powered off a battery right now, I'm going to take this XT30 connector that I've got plugged into a wall adapter, and if I plug that in, you see this is going to change. So currently, it's now being powered from the wall adapter, which means because of the diodes inside, the batteries are not actually powering it at all now. It's only the wall adapter powering it, and you can see it's at 12.21 volts. The battery percent has gone away because it's not powered from battery, so there's no need to calculate the battery percent. And this tells you that it is indeed powered from an external source, from that XT30. The external power can be 8.5 to 12 volts, which is the limit of my buck converter, and also the maximum of the battery voltage. It really only can tell what's plugged in depending on the voltage that it senses. And if I unplug this external source, it's going to go back to being powered from the battery. You can also power from USB, so I've got a micro USB cable here. Plug that in. And now it is being powered from USB. So you can see it is indeed powered from USB, and 5.37 volts. That's pretty high power USB port, but it does the trick. And if you're in USB mode and you select power off, it'll just say it's safe to unplug USB. So this means that it's not currently doing anything else like saving files to the SD card. So you are safe to unplug. Okay, so next we have the clock. So the microcontroller that I'm using to run this, the TNC 4.0, actually has a built-in real-time clock. All you have to do is connect a 3-point cell battery just to keep time. So I took advantage of that, and now I have a clock. You can see currently it's 7:22 on Saturday, March 26, 2022. That's basically all it does, it's just a clock. I don't know why I put it in there, just because it's cool, I guess. Okay, I'm going to power it from the battery again. Now, if you press and hold back, as you just saw me do there, it'll, A, if you're plugged into USB, it'll bring you to the safe to unplug USB, which means that it's not currently doing anything. Or B, if you're powered from battery or external, it'll ask you if you wish to power off, and if you press enter again to confirm the power off, then it will power itself off. I'll show you that in a second, but right now I'm going to unplug USB, power back on again, and I'll show you that powering off sequence. So you press and hold back, it's going to go to the confirm power off menu, you press enter, it's going to say powering off, and then it just powers itself off. In its powered off state, it uses absolutely no power from the battery or external wall adapter, which is really great, so the battery isn't going to drain over time if you just had it sit on the shelf. Okay, power it on again, and I'll show you some of the games. So, this is Snake. I'm sure you've probably heard of Snake. If you haven't, you start as this little cube, and your goal is basically to collect all these little food. And every time you collect a piece of food, your length goes up by 1, and the delay for movement goes down by a little bit. In this case, it's not really noticeable until you get to much higher lengths, but it is there. And then you just use the joystick to move around, like that. And I'm just going to die here. use the joystick to reset there. If you press enter, because this is highlighted, if you press enter, it'll ask you if you want to reset the high score. In this case, no, I do not want to reset the high score. But that is what these little bubbles mean, is if you press enter, it'll do that. So we're going to go back into the game function select menu. This is Game of Pi. So this is a little game that I made to help me memorize pi. It's not really that useful at all, but right now it's going to ask you what digit you want to start at. I'm going to start at 3 digits. I know a lot more than that, but I don't want to type them all out right now. It's going to ask you to memorize those digits, so I've got it, 3.14. And now it's going to ask you to write them out using this little keyboard thing. 3.14. There you go. Press enter, and it tells me that I got it right. And then it'll just increase the digit number by 1, and it'll keep going so long as you get them right. And you have your standard keyboard keys. It's not a very plentiful keyboard, but it does do the trick. Backspace, delete just gets rid of everything that you've written already. And then this just brings you back to that what digit do you wish to start at menu. And then the final game that I have on here right now is Pong. Now, if you haven't heard of Pong, you've got this little paddle here, and basically your goal is to stop this ball from going beyond the paddle. And the way you do that is to move the paddle around. And it's going to bounce off the paddle, and it'll bounce around. This is the first game that I made that has decent physics. So the ball actually bounces around and reverses its direction when it hits the wall and all that stuff. It's not perfect, but it does do the trick. And now, if it goes beyond you, it just ends up there. And then push again to reset. And then you can play again if you want. It is kind of hard to see the ball, but there's really no way to avoid that. And then go back again. So that is basically all the functions of my Gameduino version 4. If you have any more questions, or if you have anything else that you'd like to see, questions you want answered, put them down in the comment section. And other than that, that's all for now. Bye!